Hello everyone, and welcome to our presentation. This is the 5th presentation by our education technician team. I'm down here in Mammoth Campground. As you can see, it's currently snowing even though it is spring. Down here in the lower elevation near Mammoth, we have sagebrush, conifer trees. Mammoth is located in the northwest part of the park. It is currently about 1 degree Celsius. If you know what that is, if you know what that is in Fahrenheit, please comment on that. I am here with Ranger Molly today. She's going to be talking about birds. If you hear birds in the background during the presentation, please comment on what bird you think it is. Ranger Molly.
Hi, I'm Ranger Molly. Welcome to, Yellowstone National Park in spring. Believe it or not, this is spring here in Yellowstone. I know it is snowing. We've been saying this on most of our videos. It's been snowing even though it's spring, but we know it's spring not just because of the calendar, but because of the birds. That's what we're going to talk about in this program. We're going to talk about some of the birds that have returned to Yellowstone and brought hopes of a warmer season with them. There are more than 280 different species of birds here in Yellowstone. I do not think I could ever remember that many birds. So we're just going to focus on 6 today. And we're also going to focus on, we're only going to refer to the birds by their common names. Scientists, like those in the park, will refer to wildlife of any kind, not just birds, by their scientific name. That includes 2 parts. So there's a genus name and a species name, and they're often in Greek or Latin. We're not going to use those. Those are useful if you're communicating internationally with people, but we're just going to use the common names today. The reason why you might not want to use a common name, even just in a regular conversation, is because it can be a little confusing, not just from language to language, but also within your own language. So in the past, a certain bird was known as the sparrow hawk. It was neither a sparrow nor a hawk. It was actually the smallest, it is the smallest falcon in North America, the American kestrel. So we can get tripped up that way. One of my favorite common names that is also from kind of a bygone era, it's no longer in fashion, is the water ouzel. If you think you know what the water ouzel is, I want you to write that in the comments. So we're going to talk about, as I said, a few of the many different bird species here in Yellowstone. The first is one of the first to return, and whenever rangers see this bird, we really feel like spring is just around the corner, or it has just started. That is the mountain bluebird. So you can see this mountain bluebird here is a bright, beautiful blue, and they can perch on the tiniest sprig of sage. You might be wondering how that's possible. They're pretty long, they're about 6 to 8 inches long, but they don't weigh very much. A mountain bluebird weighs about 30 grams, which might be the same as about these 3 grape tomatoes. How can they be that lightweight? Well, they're mostly fluff. So just like your pets at home, if you were to run a bird or your pets under some water in the bathtub, you would see that they are much smaller than they appear. And they also have really strong, dense bones. So their bones aren't exactly hollow. They do have a different structure to them, but they're really strong and thin. Think about the difference between a titanium matchstick and a wooden matchstick. Which one do you think is going to be stronger, and which one is going to be smaller? Both go to the titanium matchstick. So you'll find mountain bluebirds here balancing on that sagebrush or any kind of shrub or twig really, but they're going to make a home in those standing dead trees like this one here. Those standing dead trees have cavities in them thanks to woodpeckers. You might be hearing a woodpecker right now or on occasion. I won't tell you which one. I think you're supposed to figure that out. But that makes those woodpecker holes make a cozy home for mountain bluebirds. Another bird that comes to Yellowstone in the springtime that would never fit into one of those cavities is the sandhill crane. So sandhill cranes are particularly beautiful birds. They've got a beautiful red crest, white on the underside of their face, long dark beaks, and they've got tan and sort of a steely gray color on the rest of the feathers on their body. They're quite tall. They are about 1.2 meters tall, so tall that they can sometimes be mistaken for people. They stand on really lanky legs, and they'll use those legs for a few different things. They'll dance on them as part of their courtship. So the males that dance really nice with the females, they'll figure out that, yeah, I think you're my mate. And they'll also use their legs to actually ward off intruders. So they'll kick with those legs as well. You might mistake them if they're just standing still for a person, but you would never mistake their call for a person. A lot of rangers like to think that a sandhill crane sounds a lot like a pterodactyl, or any kind of dinosaur, really. Thankfully, you're not supposed to imitate any animal calls here in Yellowstone. You want to make sure you're not taking them away from their life. If you're trying to call an animal in, that disrupts their daily life, but you also want to respect them and not harass them. So I am off the hook. I am not going to make a sandhill crane pterodactyl call for you all, but you can find their call in our comments section. So I definitely encourage you to listen to that at home and maybe try to make your own dinosaur call. All birds today are still related. They are related to dinosaurs, and they're from the specific group of dinosaurs that included the Tyrannosaurus rex. The next bird we're going to talk about, I think, is just as fearsome and just as impressive of a meat eater. It's actually, jury's still out on whether or not the Tyrannosaurus rex is a predator or scavenger. But this next bird is just as fearsome as a Tyrannosaurus rex, in my opinion. That's the peregrine falcon. Peregrine falcons are all over dark on the back, and their undersides have that lighter color with a little bit of brown splotches on it. And they have a dark head with those dark streaks that come down from their eyes. Those actually function kind of the same way that black football marks work on a person's face. So they'll absorb the sun to keep the sun from their eyes. That's really important for a peregrine falcon because they want to keep their wits about them, and they want to keep their eyes trained on their target. When they are moving as fast as they do, they can dive at over 200 miles per hour. I think the fastest time a peregrine falcon has clocked is fastest speed is 242 miles per hour. Now, they are moving that fast because they are hunting other animals. They are hunting birds. And if you want to be able to catch a swift, you better be as swift as a swift, if not swifter, right? I have not seen them catch that particular bird, but I have seen them catch here in Yellowstone what I assume was a yellow warbler. I can't be certain because all I saw was a peregrine falcon diving and then a puff of yellow. All they have to do is strike something to take it out and make it their meal. This makes them really impressive predators, but unfortunately it also subjects them to something called bioaccumulation. And this was one of the reasons why peregrine falcon numbers declined in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. There was a pesticide used at that time called DDT. And DDT was very effective at getting rid of pests, but it also traveled up the food chain, in particular in birds. So you'd have insects that were impacted by DDT. You'd have songbirds eating some of those insects. The DDT then was transferred into those songbirds. And then all of those songbirds were eaten by predators like peregrine falcon. And peregrine falcons then had a whole bunch of DDT in their system, and that weakened their eggshells. So unfortunately, their nests weren't as successful, and the numbers did decline. In the 1980s, Yellowstone started reintroducing peregrine falcons, and DDT was banned as a pesticide. So both of those actions helped restore peregrine falcons, not only in Yellowstone, but also in the West and across many places in the country. Peregrine falcons are not the only top bird predator, right? So they weren't the only ones who were facing problems because of that pesticide. Another bird who faced problems because of DDT is our national bird, the bald eagle. Bald eagles are easily recognizable with their white heads, black bodies, and bright yellow beaks, and they do like to eat fish, but sometimes they're also going to eat things that that might allow DDT and other pesticides to bioaccumulate in their bodies. In the same time, bald eagles were facing problems not just because of pesticides, but because of habitat loss and also some shooting. Bald eagles were protected and they were listed as an endangered species in 1967. Because of refuges like Yellowstone, there were places where bald eagles were able to replenish their numbers, and eventually in 2007, bald eagles were taken off the endangered species list. You can find them here in Yellowstone starting their nesting season pretty early. They are some hardy birds. So they will start in February through April. They don't mind the snow. They don't mind the cold. But they do mind people. They're quite shy. Just like any other animal here in Yellowstone, you want to give all birds, especially nesting birds, at least 25 yards of space. That's 75 feet, to make sure that they can continue to go about their lives undisturbed. Now, bald eagles might be common, not common, but they're here. They're pretty easy to see. In Yellowstone, they might not be as common in your backyard, but I'm pretty sure the next bird will be somewhere nearby in your neighborhood. And that is the great horned owl. Great horned owls have that all over mottled brown, white, and tan coloring. They've got those tall feather tufts on top of their head. That's why they're called the great horned owl. Those are not horns. You could tell. Those are feathers, right? So great horned owls are a pretty popular bird here in Yellowstone and in most places across the country. They are able to make a home not just in high montane forests, but also down in low, hot deserts, in cities and in wilderness areas. I like to think that just because they're common doesn't make them less interesting. It means they're adaptable. It means they're able to make a lot of different situations work for them. And that's because they're really good stealthy hunters. Great horned owls, like all owls, have really soft, fluffy feathers. And those fluffy feathers and this combed edge on the leading feather on their wing, those fluffy feathers kind of act as noise cancelers. They silence that wing's motion. So if you were a rodent that was trying to escape a great horned owl, you're not going to hear them coming. I don't know if you can hear that. There might be some competing noise right now. So I'm just going to wait a second and try again. You probably still didn't hear very much because they are so soft and fuzzy and therefore very quiet. This wing, however, and these feathers are dark and shiny and slick. And while they might look really slick, they sound very loud. That is the sound of birds that do not have the silencers, and it's also the sound of the next bird we're going to talk about, the common raven. Now, like the great horned owl, just because they're common doesn't mean that they're not interesting. It means that they're actually, I think, some of the most interesting birds. Common ravens can be found in most places across the West. If you don't have ravens in your area, you might have their cousins, the crows, or any kind of jay, a Clark's nutcracker, a magpie. They're all related. They're all very intelligent. Bird brain should not be an insult. It should be a compliment. Birds are really smart. Ravens especially so. Ravens in Yellowstone have figured out that if they want some really nice meat, they should follow wolves. So in the wintertime, you can find ravens around a wolf carcass, like here in this picture. They'll take advantage of whatever pieces of the carcass they can without being pushed off. And they'll figure out how to follow wolves and sometimes even hunters to get at those carcasses. I'm really curious to learn what you all have experienced with ravens or crows or any of their cousins. Leave us your favorite raven or crow story in the comments so everyone can share and enjoy that. If you haven't seen a raven or crow, you've probably seen at least one of these birds, if not one of their relatives. We would love to know who is sort of the herald for spring for your area. Who do you think of when you think of spring? Which bird comes to mind? Which are you most excited to see? I love learning about birds not just because they tell us that warmer weather is coming, but also because they help us feel more connected. If you know your birds and you know a few common species, just about anywhere you go, you can feel like you have a friend, you have something familiar. So I encourage you all to keep learning about birds and leave us any questions you might have in the comments.
Good job, Molly. We do have some questions.
Okay.
James, who is 5, said, do birds nest near geysers or on top of geysers?
Wow, that is a great question. So I am not aware of any birds that nest on top of a geyser. That would be a pretty adventurous bird. But there are birds that can be found really close to geysers. One of those is the killdeer. I don't know, can you see the killdeer in this photo? So it's brown on top, white underneath, and it's got those black stripes on its head and its neck. Those are some of the birds that you'll find around our hot springs and thermal areas. And there's quite a few birds that will nest in trees not too far away. We've got hot springs and geysers all throughout the park, and a lot of times next to rivers. So that means that birds like bald eagles or osprey might be nesting nearby.
Nice. Kyle asked, are there cliff closures like in Zion for peregrine falcon nesting?
Yeah, so we do want to protect our peregrines, and not just peregrines, but other cliff nesters here in Yellowstone. I would check our website for more information on which specific areas might be impacted. But we definitely want to make sure to give them space. Peregrine falcons, golden eagles will also nest on cliffs. Peregrines are pretty hardy. They don't actually build nests. They just scratch up a bit of rock, and that's all their kids get. If they want something different, they've got to move out. So they're just going to need that. It's called an eyrie. But yeah, we do have some cliff closures on occasion.
Nice. It seems like that's all our questions.
Okay. Great. Well, as a reminder, if you have ever heard the term bird nerd, that is also not an insult. I think that's a high compliment as well. But I don't think you can consider yourself a true bird nerd unless you know a very nerdy bird joke. So I'd like to close out this program, unless we have, do we have another final question? Okay, sorry. I would like to close out this program with a final bird joke, and also I want to see your best bird joke in the comments. What kind of bird does not need a comb? A bald eagle. Bye. Have a good afternoon.